I made 100K on Poshmark, so you don't have to. Here's everything that I learned. This video is meant to kind of just be an info dump of my reselling experience and whether or not you should try reselling too. So let's get started. I started reselling when I was in my early 20s. It was a way for me to bring in extra money for groceries and stuff, and it did not require a lot of upfront capital, so it was very easy to step into and did bring me in like on average 2 to 3K a month the first several years. The first thing that I did was that I went through my whole closet and I just resold some stuff just to get a little bit of cash. I think I only made like $20 for my first few sales combined. And then I took that $20 and I went to like a fill a bag sale or a Goodwill Dollar Days or something. And I found some items that would sell for more. I feel like the most common questions I see in the reselling community are, why are my items selling, or why won't they sell for more? And people often complain about the buyers and stuff, but you know that old adage that says the customer is always right? It was never meant to apply to customer service. It specifically means that customers will determine demand. So if somebody's not buying your product, it's probably just a bad product, usually. The question of how many listings should I have really doesn't matter as much as like what you're selling, and focusing on finding high quality items that people want and will sell fast is the focus of this video. So how do you find something that will sell both fast and for a lot of money? When you see an item at the thrift store, you do not want to ask yourself, will it sell? If there's any doubt it will sell, you do not want to get it. The two questions you want to be asking yourself are, how quickly will it sell? And how much will it sell for? That should be the foundation of your entire business. And to do this, you want to look up comps for the item and see how quickly the items are selling. If you know nothing about the fashion industry, don't be scared. This is what I would do. Open up your Poshmark app. I'm actually going to record myself doing this while we do this. All right, so we are in the Poshmark app. I would go to the shop button and then scroll down to like dresses. Dresses is a great category to get to know. It's fast selling. Same with like jackets and shoes. Those are the three that I focus on primarily in the women's fashion industry. So what you're gonna want to do is click on that button and scroll down to sold. And then you want to click on this. Instead of just shared, click on just in. And then click on price and filter for the prices that you're looking for. Generally, I would do 50 or above, but you know, if you want to just do like 100 or above, you can, depending on like where you live. This list right here, those are things that sold like today, and they sold right after they were listed, which means that somebody wanted them like immediately. They're very in demand. At the top of this list, we have a brand called Hyacinth and Anthropologie Farm Rio, which I have sold both of those for pretty good money. But, you know, you can just like scroll down and kind of look at what's selling. I would go through, and if you see like a brand name multiple times, write it down and just kind of like get an idea of the things you should be looking for. Like J. Crew, for example. J. Crew is a brand I sold a lot, but not every J. Crew item is great to buy, so it very much depends on the style. If you're having a hard time finding the style of the item, you can actually take a picture of it and then Google image search it. And this often brings up the item on Google, and you can see how much it originally sold for on the website and then find any sold or available listings for it on like eBay and Poshmark and kind of get an idea of what it's selling for and if it's in demand. There is like a little secret, kind of, not really secret. If you look at a listing on Poshmark and you open up the image of the first image in the listing in a new tab, you can look at the URL and it will say the date that it was listed. So on Poshmark, it'll say sold like March 18th, but that could have been 2023 or 2020, you don't know. But that listing URL will give you kind of an indication of when that was listed and maybe a better idea of how quickly it sold. So yeah, I'm seeing lots of Anthropologie brands. If you want to know how to know if it's Anthropologie, on the inside care tag, there is an RN number. Like if you don't know the brand or if the brand tag is taken out, you can check the RN number and look it up on Google on the RN lookup website. Anthropologie is 66170 They have tons of sub-brands, like Farm Rio has done collaborations with them. I sold a ton of Anthropologie, so getting familiar with their sub-brands and stuff I would say is pretty important. Same with Revolve. Revolve is the same thing. It's like a collaboration website with a ton of different brands. So getting to know kind of the stuff that sells on there. Christian Dior, great brand to find. I have sold that. Miu Miu, incredibly expensive brand. You can also kind of like come through and just like look at the brands and see if everything in that brand sells for a lot or if it's just like a little bit. So if you click on like Zara, you'll find that maybe a coat or a dress occasionally will sell for a lot, but mostly it sells for pretty cheap. But this brand looks like, let's go to Solds. Looks like it sells for quite a bit. So this is definitely something to pick up when you find it, or at least look up when you find it. Johnny Was. I sold a lot of Johnny Was as well. Free People. There are some pretty. House of CB, we saw that one earlier. Frank and Eileen, Reformation. Okay, so these are all like really common and popular brands. If you go to your local consignment store, you'll probably find one of these brands on the racks, and you may be familiar with these brands as it is. But so doing that with like different categories, if you do vintage, you can look through vintage, you can type vintage in and do the same thing with it and kind of get an idea for what's selling in your preferred niche, and that will help you while you're out thrifting. I would try to only pick up stuff that's going to sell for a lot, even if it takes more time, unless you're, limited by travel, you don't have a car or you have kids or something. Being choosy is definitely something I would recommend. You can blow through your sourcing budget very quickly when you find an item that looks interesting, looks like it might be of value. So you type the brand name into Poshmark and you go to like the little filter button, and then click to sold listings, and then also filter button again and click on just in. You can see the most recent sold listings for the item that you're looking at, and you can kind of get an estimate of what it will sell for doing this. I got to the point where I didn't really like picking up anything that would sell for less than $50, but if you live in like a really small town or something like that, you're probably not going to be able to find a ton of stuff that will sell for more than that. So, you can lower that to like 30 or whatever works for you. Also, when you're looking at like an item, looking at the solds versus, available listings. If there's like 2 available listings and like 25 sold listings, that's a pretty good indication that it's going to sell. But if you're looking through available listings and there are a ton, especially in the size that you're picking up, and the sold listings, maybe there are a ton too, but it's like, or if there are a ton available, I would not pick it up, just in general. Also, keeping track of items that maybe sold out on the website. If you find something in a thrift store and you can see that it's sold out on the website and maybe it has like a couple sold listings and none available, that's a pretty good indication that that would be a good flip. And a lot of these brands have been around for a long time, so you don't want to be picking up stuff that's like super old unless it's like a vintage item that's in demand or something. But like generally newer seasons of items are better, and you can tell like the age usually in the care tag. It'll say the year sometimes, and if not, using the reverse Google image search is helpful. I would also get to know like the sales at your local thrift stores. A lot of thrift stores restock right after big sales. That stuff won't be picked through yet, and you'll be able to find some better items. The Goodwill bins is such an interesting place because you have the t-shirt bros who are so excited over like stained t-shirts. People storm the bins. I've definitely been there, but I find that a lot of people miss some of like the best stuff, some of the most expensive stuff. I have found silk dresses worth hundreds of dollars that people just skipped over. So don't be discouraged about all the people who rush the bins. Definitely go back and look and just like take your time. Depending on where you live, some places it's definitely harder. Some places it's really easy to find stuff worth tons of money. It feels like treasure hunting. It really does, and there is like a dopamine hit with it, and it's really fun when you find stuff that is going to sell for a lot of money. Another tip is look at like the local brands in your area if you find them a lot at your thrift stores. Like, for example, I find Cotopaxi quite a bit in my thrift store, and I know it has kind of like a cult-like following, so if I list anything on there, I almost always will get a ton of offers on it and it'll sell. So finding stuff like that, niching in in your area can be really helpful. I also thrifted a lot on like ThreadUp, and this is a good place to find stuff if you're, you know, at home and you can't really go out thrifting. It is like a little more expensive, but I have had some really solid flips on there, especially for like sub brands for like Revolve and Anthropology, where ThreadUp doesn't know that it's a sub brand. So if buyers are looking for it, it's not going to be listed under Anthropology, it's going to be listed under Cecilia Prado or something. So picking up those items, then selling them under the correct brand name in your Poshmark listing will be really helpful. Reselling is ever evolving. There's always new brands that are popular and in demand, and keeping up with that can be challenging but very rewarding. So learning, you know, new brands every week, keeping track of styles, going out to like the local mall and just checking out what's in season and what's popular, and like talking to people can be really helpful for figuring out like what's popular and what's in demand. I've also heard a lot of people ask like how many active listings I should have, but I feel like that question does not matter nearly as much as what you're selling. You could have 600 items listed for $20 each, or you could have 5 items listed for $700 each. Those are completely different business models. The first is a low COGS business model. This means low cost of goods sold, which essentially means that you're buying like the cheapest stuff you can find. So this is, you know, if you're going to the Goodwill bins or like dollar days or fill a bag sales, you're trying to spend the least amount of money as possible on inventory. This would be your business model. And most business models probably are a mix of both, but, you know, for brevity's sake, we'll just talk about them separately. Yeah, this model is really great if you have no capital to invest in your business and you need to generate some capital to start. I wouldn't recommend doing the low COGS business model forever, but it can be a really great way to, you know, turn $1 into $20 and turn nothing into something. The other business model is the high COGS business model. For example, I bought a pair of Gucci shoes on Poshmark for $100, and then I flipped them on eBay for $500. So those shoes had a high upfront cost, but I was able to take home $400 profit from that one sale. So that would be like a high COGS business model. And a lot of businesses are kind of in between, you know, like a lot of people will buy things on ThreadUp for like $20 or $40 and sell them for a few $100s, plus go to the bins and go to Goodwill, and just there's a wide variety of ways to apply this knowledge. You know, there are people who do this just selling designer items. They only sell like maybe 10 items a month and they bring in $5-6K a month if you're selling for like $500 to $700 each. But you have to know the demand, and you have to do your research, and you have to be really thorough. For those designer items, I did have like an authenticator that I used. So I would like send pictures in to that authenticator before I even bought the item sometimes. Pretty much all of my designer flips I sourced online. And this can be for a lot of reasons. Sometimes their pictures are really bad. Sometimes they don't know what they're selling. Sometimes they just like want to sell it really, really quickly. And people undervalue their items all the time. If you do your research, you can find really good items just on like other reselling apps. I've sourced on Vinted and Depop and Vestiaire Collective and ThreadUp, Poshmark, eBay, Mercari. Really just depends on the item. There's like a very real business model where you just sell designer clothing. Selling designer is probably one of the best ways to make a lot of money long term on Poshmark. Maybe not the only way, but with less work, that is probably one of the best ways. Poshmark is kind of like a social beast. It wants you to be on the platform all the time. I absolutely recommend a subscription sharing service and offer service if you're going to be doing it regularly. I use Closet Tools, and that would share my closet for me and send offers to buyers automatically, which was really helpful. Don't give yourself carpal tunnel. It's not worth it, I promise. And if you sign up through any of my links, some of them are affiliate links because everybody has got to hustle, but it's no extra money for you. It just helps me out. So yeah, thanks. Let's talk about inventory management next. I used Vendoo because I did not just sell on Poshmark. I also sold on eBay and sometimes Mercari and Depop and Etsy, just depending on Tradesy, whatever. Vestiaire Collective, depending on the item. But I really like Vendoo and I recommend them. They automatically delist items after they have sold, so if I sell something on eBay, it'll delete it from Poshmark, which I really appreciated. It also sent offers for me and all that fun stuff. Yeah, and it makes cross-listing really easy. I do know with eBay, like if you're cross-listing to eBay, using like a cross-listing service might hinder your rankings a tiny bit, but it was worth it to me because if I didn't use a cross-listing service, I wouldn't list on there at all. And eBay actually made up more than 50% of my sales most of the time. So would definitely recommend cross-listing once you get comfortable enough with reselling in general. So many ways to do inventory management and storage, but I would recommend setting up a system before you have way too many items that you can't find anything. When I first started, I just kept everything in boxes, and I would just like search through the boxes trying to find stuff, and it was a nightmare. Eventually I upgraded to bins with letters on them, and then each bin held like 25 bags, and I just used reusable gallon bags that kept dust out, that kept pests out of my items, and each of those bags had a number, so a bag would be labeled like A21, and that would go into the A bin. And then, you can put those in order if you want, but if not, it's not too hard to search through your bin. On Poshmark and eBay and Vendu, there is a spot you can put your SKU number. This is always where I put my bag number. So when I am pulling my listings to ship them, I can just make a quick list of all the SKU numbers I need and get all my items out fairly quickly. Let's talk about shipping. So shipping on Poshmark is pretty simple. You can use free USPS boxes and poly mailers, and then just print off the Poshmark label, and then you can schedule pickups with your post office just online for free, and they'll come pick it up from your house. And if you live in like a place where you can't leave packages on the porch, just have them knock and they'll pick it up from your door. So that was really helpful for me, especially when I was selling like 20 packages at once. It can be a lot taking those into the post office and dumping them into the thing. So shipping on Poshmark, definitely buy the free shipping supplies. You don't have to pay for them all. I don't recommend buying like your own poly mailers or anything when you can just get free shipping supplies from the USPS website. I'll link it down below. eBay is a little bit different. If you sign up for like an eBay subscription, you get a free quarterly credit. So unless you are shipping priority mail, you will need to have your own poly mailers or boxes that are not USPS priority label branded, and you can buy like poly mailers with that, and that was usually enough to sustain me. I didn't have to buy other mailers or anything. Do keep that in mind if you're using like USPS ground or something. You'll need your own mailers. And then when I was shipping my items, sometimes I had thank you cards, sometimes I didn't. Sometimes I wrapped them in brown paper and tied them with twine, and sometimes I didn't. And it didn't really matter, didn't make a big difference. So whatever you want to do, doesn't matter. Great. Something also, when you are shipping, you can order free labels on USPS website and use any printer. These labels are just like little 4x6, and they peel off, so you're not sitting there taping down your labels, which is the worst. This is a great way to do it if you do not want to invest in a label printer. I've had a Dymo, and right now I have a Rollo, and I love the Rollo. I've shipped probably like 8,000 orders with the Rollo printer. Highly recommend it. I had a Dymo for a while, and it sucked. Just constantly got jammed and stuff. The Rollo is easier to clean, and I like it a lot better. I'd only recommend getting a label printer when the cost of ink costs more than like the label printer will over time, because label printers, you do have to buy the labels, whereas if you're using free USPS labels, you just have to buy ink. So until I was shipping like 200 items a month, I didn't really think the label printer was worth it, but it is now. I'd also recommend like getting a business mailbox. I use iPostal, but you can get them through like your local USPS and stuff. This just helped me feel like peace of mind, just so my address wasn't on 200 shipping labels a month. Plus, like, they get all my returns, and it's really easy to just have them bring them to my house. So there are a lot of like ways that you can scale a reselling business. I do have friends who have like warehouses, who've had employees, who've brought in well over 200, 300K a year. This usually only happens if they have employees. It is possible to get there, especially if you plan on hiring employees and stuff, and maybe doing like liquidation or wholesale one day, but I would be very wary about doing that. There's lots of like wholesale websites that you can buy stuff from, but often they charge like a premium for items that won't sell for very much. And I think you should just start your own brand at that point, truthfully. And I'll make a video about doing that because that's what I did, and it's been way better than reselling. But reselling, okay, I admit, reselling was a really good way to practice and learn how to run a business, and it taught me a lot about supply and demand, and I got to know like the fashion market so well because I knew what people bought like instantly, that I was able to design my own products that sold instantly as well, and that made a big difference for me. So it did give me a huge foundational knowledge of fashion that's helped me a ton, but I also felt like I was just working a pretty shitty minimum wage job most of the time. All right, so I'm gonna move into like metrics a little bit, not like, do not be intimidated, it's pretty basic stuff, but one thing that you're gonna wanna keep track of when you are reselling is your sell-through rate. And this is just what percentage of items that you list sell. So your sell-through rate is your number of items sold divided by your number of items listed times like 100 to give it like a percentage. So the first is the percentage of your entire inventory that you sell through each month. So if you sell like 30% of your inventory each month, that can give you an indication of like how many items you need to be replenishing the inventory, how many items you need to be growing, etc. So if you like want to sell 50 items per month and your sell-through rate is 63%, then you're going to need to have 83 active listings to sell 50 items every month, if that makes sense. So the other sell-through rate is not like your whole inventory, but how many of the items you listed this month are you selling through. So if you list 30 items in a month and you sell 30 items in a month, that means you are selling through 100% of the inventory you're listing each month. So if you're selling more than you're listing, you might be at like your capacity for yourself. That might indicate you need to like hire somebody to help free you up so you can, keep growing your business. But there's a lot of like things that this number can tell you, and I think it's kind of an important number to at least look up once in a while. So I actually put together a PDF guide called Overnight Flips, and I'll link it down below. I go into more depth on numbers, and I talk about like how many active listings you need with like your sales numbers to hit your goals and that kind of stuff. It's a little bit hard to do it in video format, but I am trying to give you as much information as possible in this video, so you don't have to get the book if you don't want to. But if you are interested in having everything I say in a little more condensed of a guide, and you want to support my endeavors to share this information with people and stuff, go ahead and take a look at it below. The other thing that I would keep track of is your average sales price, or your ASP. This is just your total revenue over your number of sales, and it just tells you like how much stuff is selling for. So for a long time, mine was like $12, which is awful. I upped it after a couple years to $35, and then by the end of my reselling journey, it was up at like $65, which was the average price of stuff that sold. So if you're already listing the max number of listings you can do each month, being a little pickier, trying to increase your average sale price by like only picking up things that will sell for more can increase your revenue and your profit overall. And I also recommend like keeping a spreadsheet or keeping track of your costs, downloading like QuickBooks Self-Employed or something, just some simple bookkeeping tool to keep track. It can be really easy to spend more than you're making, especially if you have a job or other income, and it isn't always good to invest more in the business if you don't know your numbers, and if you don't have a high sell-through rate, you can just end up with hundreds of items that aren't selling or a death pile that you can't get through. So definitely keeping track of your numbers and your money is super important, and I would highly recommend it. Okay, next we're going to talk about photos, because your photos really matter. Like, I don't want to say that they don't matter, because they do. You can just use a phone, that's okay, but I would just go with a blank white background or like a white wall, hang something up, get a pretty hanger, and hang your stuff on a wall and take pictures on your phone. That is a great way to do it, but I see tons of people try to decorate the background, and like Poshmark's app is really small, so when the buyer is looking, if there's a plant or a macrame on the background and they can't really tell what it is, they're just gonna scroll past it because it's a little tiny thumbnail, it's confusing. So you want it to just be your item. You want the items to be properly lit. I've used tons of different lighting setups over the years, but having a window kind of from the side can help show texture in your image. You can use like a light source, but I would recommend kind of having it from the side at an angle. Just make sure it's bright enough. And then I would recommend downloading like a pro photo app if you're using your phone. This also applies to your like a DSLR. But yeah, I use Open Camera, which is a free photo app. I really like it. But it has a lock exposure button and a lock white balance button. The white balance is important, especially if you're shooting things like jeans, because jeans can like turn yellow when you put them in front of a camera, and you don't want that. You want to retain the true color. So what you do when setting your white balance is you just point your camera at like the white wall, and then you lock your white balance. So then when you put things that are different colors in front of your camera, the color isn't going to change. Same with your exposure. You can lock your exposure, so then if you're moving closer or farther away from your item, the brightness isn't going to like go up and down. So those are pretty basic photo taking recommendations. Buyers are fairly forgiving, especially about like if you're trying to like edit every picture or delete the backgrounds and stuff. I would just recommend getting your camera settings right and then not worrying about editing. But getting your camera settings right is important, and then having like a clear basic background that isn't like covered by stuff is really helpful. I have tried modeling over the years. I have used a dress form mannequin thing to show all my pictures. I've used cute rugs. I've tried tons of stuff, and the best converting way is a white wall and a hanger and stock photos. Stock photos help a ton. I love stock photos. And you can find these by reverse Google image searching your item, usually pretty easy. And like for your descriptions, you can also find those reverse Google image searching your items. Find a listing or find the original like listing on the website and just copy the title and description. Super helpful. I also think it's important to write a decent description and title. There's two main things that you want your description and title to do. One is you want it to be findable, searchable, like SEO and on Poshmark and whatnot. And the other is you want to give the buyer as much information as possible without scaring them away. The format that I used was the brand, then item style, then like details and the color, and then the size at the end. So it would be like J. Crew, Eliza, dress, navy, size small or something. Or like A-line or button down or whatever. And then in the description, I usually just copied and pasted the title because they're both searchable separately for SEO. And then, in the description, I would also like go over the features, like the cuff line and the material. Material is also searchable. So if it has like a material of note, like wool or silk or 100% cotton, or I always put that in there because if I didn't, everybody always asked what the material was. And I would take pictures of the material tag for the description and people still asked, so. Ooh, pro tip. If you're having a hard time finding a stock photo, you can type in the material with the reverse Google image search, because often like the brand website will list the material on their website. So that can be helpful finding stock images. All right. And then, in the description, you want to know if there's any flaws and if it's with tags or not. And then if you want to put measurements in, you can, or measurements available upon request. If you don't do measurements, just leave it out because sometimes measurements suck. Okay, I think I covered as much as I can remember to cover, but if not, please forgive me, and I'll try to be active in the comment section. So if you have questions, I can answer them, and if I need to make a new video, I will. But really, like, reselling is about consistency, and it's about checking your numbers. Also, don't be afraid to outsource. I outsourced my listing creation and descriptions to somebody for like 3 years, and it was a great decision. I loved my VA, so definitely recommend it. I think I used Upwork for that. Let's spill the tea. So I went to Posh Fest in like 2018, I think. And that's kind of when I realized that Poshmark felt a little bit like a cult. For those who don't know, I grew up in a cult, so I would know probably that it felt like a cult. It didn't quite feel like an MLM, but a little bit. Just a little bit. It definitely has like the community aspect of it feels a little culty because Poshmark only wants you to sell on Poshmark. It only wants you to talk about Poshmark. It wants you to spend all of your time on the Poshmark app sharing, sending offers, etc. But unlike an MLM, you don't have to sell to your friends, and you do make money. You don't make maybe a ton of money, you make some money. So I guess maybe it's not a cult, but it does feel like one a little bit. But it is one of those businesses that you put in work and you put in effort and you make sales. Whenever I wasn't making enough sales, I just listed and I made more money. So it was good in that way. My chokehold in reselling was my own labor, and I was never really making enough to hire somebody to take over like photographing for me. And I didn't really want to be like in a thrift store the rest of my life. So it wasn't like a long-term job for me, but it was a great stepping stone and I learned a ton. And I made a lot of friends in the reselling community, and some of them I still have, and I really like my friends. I have some who still do it full time. I have some who have moved on. So the community aspect can be great, but be careful not to get sucked in, because sitting on the app and sharing other people's listings isn't really going to make you money. The thing that is going to make you money is listing your items, sending offers. That helps. I would share, but hire a sharing service, please. Don't give yourself carpal tunnel. And then go thrifting and get new stuff and like learning the stuff that sells the best, buying the stuff that's in demand. That is really what's going to make a difference. Reselling can be a great way to get started with an online business. I appreciate the things that I did learn from reselling, and it really helped me kind of understand supply and demand, and it did help me start the business I have today. So I am grateful for it in that way. But yeah, thank you for joining me on this video all about my reselling journey and spewing all my reselling knowledge. I'm going to be sharing more business tips on this channel because reselling is not the only business I have tried. I've done tons of different passive income projects, and I admittedly really like starting businesses. It's really fun for me, and I don't like maintaining them, so this is a perfect place to try things and share with you how I made them work, and then move on and try something new. Some of the future topics I'm planning on talking about are self-publishing. I helped my partner self-publish their fantasy novels and found pretty good success doing that. I also will talk a lot about e-commerce because that is what I'm currently doing in my e-commerce business, which was a big jump I made from reselling and kind of the natural progression from reselling. I have a whole bunch of other small things I have done over the years that I plan to share on here. And I also plan on making videos about like product photography and Facebook ads and all the different business skills that I have picked up over the years. I'm really excited to share with you guys, so thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe to follow along with that journey. Let me know if you have any questions or if there are any topics you would like me to cover, and let me know if there are any business ideas you would like me to try and share on this channel. That would be fun. Anyway, thanks for watching and hanging out with me. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.